Welcome back to the Fieldcraft Survival Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Owens, not Kevin Estela, for change.
But I'm here.
I'm here. Of course you're here. Yeah. You do a lot of podcasts.
I was looking. So far this year, at the time of this recording, 31 podcasts have been released.
Do you ever get tired of listening to yourself?
I don't listen to my own podcast. Like I heard it, and I know there are some times where I'm like, I can't believe I said that. I don't listen to my own.
Well, people don't understand. You do a podcast and you talk for an hour, 2 hours sometimes, unscripted. Sometimes you're going to say stupid stuff. And I'm in the van sometimes with my wife, and she wants to listen to a podcast I'm on. I hate my own voice. So I apologize to the people who hate my voice, because I am one of them. I'm right there with you.
Yeah, we all think we sound really cool until we listen to ourselves. You're
awful.
Like, dude, I sound like a
nails
douche.
On the chalkboard. All right, so now you're in North Carolina.
Thank God. I feel like I'm back where I belong.
Back on the East Coast, right? And you grew up in Connecticut.
Grew up in Connecticut, was out in Utah for 2 years, did that little experiment, which was great until real estate prices got jacked through the roof and family had some health issues. But back on the East Coast, and I'll tell you, like, even just driving back and hitting the western border of North Carolina, I was like, I recognize that tree. I recognize it. Like, that's me being like a total like nature nerd, but but knowing the East Coast woods better than the West, it feels so damn good to be back here.
Yeah,
so
back home. When I worked in New York many years ago, I thought Connecticut was like beautiful and really high end and rich, and I drove through some places on the way up to New Hampshire. Not so much.
Yeah.
It's like anywhere, right? Everywhere's got good and bad areas, and I just drove through the bad areas.
I'll tell you, Connecticut's cool in terms of like the geography. Some of the people are really great. Some of the people are not so great, and I mainly mean the crazy politicians that we have there. Connecticut is interesting, and a lot of the East Coast states are interesting in that they predate the nation, right? I mean, there are cities in Connecticut from the 1600s.
Yeah, it's so funny because having been all over the U.S. and out west and, down south where a lot of cities are like Spanish names, and, you come down here and then you go up there and it's all English names and English sounding towns. And as you drive through, you can see the geography and the buildings change. The buildings are very different looking up there. And a lot of the roads were initially not made for cars, right?
Right. Right.
So you have a lot of small roads, smaller bridges, and it's very interesting to see when you're driving through it the changes. And you're down south here, and you're seeing signs for Civil War battlefields all over the place. But you go north of Pennsylvania, and there are no more, obviously. But it's really cool to drive through all that stuff and see that. How close is the terrain and the geography and all that here as up in Connecticut?
So the terrain and geography here, very similar, same size mountains, similar draws, things like that, same types of rocks. The vegetation is slightly different, and vegetation and edible medicinal plants, they follow bands of latitude. So down here, you see more like sugar pines and things like that. Further north, you are going to see different vegetation. So it's very similar. I really like it here, though.
Yeah,
it's fantastic.
I think you're going to have a blast. I almost feel like you weren't being utilized to your full potential in Utah, right? Because there's so much going on out there. But here, we just sat down and we had a meeting about what we're going to do, and I think you'll find your niche here, right? And we have John here also, who John worked in retail for outdoor sports for years, and he's lots and lots of knowledge on backpacks and sleeping pads and sleeping bags and all the different types and all that. And then with all the bushcraft and the survival stuff, I tell you, managing trainers. Because I'm not a survival guy, right? I went to survival school, but my bug-out bag is my Sprinter van, right? But so that's why we need experts like you, right? So as we it's much easier to find a guy to teach pistol and carbine than it is to have a guy to teach survival or edible plants or a lot of these bushcraft skills. They're much rarer to have instructors. So we've been missing that here, and it's going to be great to have you here. So we've been talking about what content we're going to work. And content's a weird thing, right? Because it does take time and it takes resources to make videos. and posts, and we are a business in the we have to make money to keep our head above water. However, your content can't be, and this is purely my opinion, it can't be too pushy, and you can't be pushing products all the time.
Right.
So we're actually going to utilize you and John's expertise to bring a series. What did you call it?
The how, not what to think.
How, not what, right?
Yeah,
so
how, not
teaching you
what.
how to think and not what to think, right? And too many people, and it goes across the board for every product, they'll be like, oh, you must use this backpack, you must use this firearm, you must use this knife, right? Whereas you make up your own damn mind, right? We will teach you what features you should be looking for and what capability you should be looking for, and then brand names don't matter. And I was telling you early on, in special operations, when we were picking a new backpack, and we would have Green Berets and SEALs and Rangers and all those guys test equipment, we'd take all the labels off, because you get these predetermined notions that, well, I want this, or I want Tier Tactical, or I want Mystery Ranch, or whatever that is. Pick the damn piece of equipment based on its capability, and not your predetermined prejudice, basically. Yeah.
Perfect example of that is, like, I remember we were out on the old property in Utah, and you're like, here, look through this rifle, look at this reticle, shoot at this target or whatever. And I'm looking through the reticle, I'm like, wow, it's super clear. And then I turn the rifle on its side, and it's the reticle, or the optic was Bushnell.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, this is a great optic. It tested really well. And I'm thinking, when I was looking through it, I was like, okay, maybe it's one of the big three, like Night Force, Vortex, Leupold,
Yeah.
And you were like, no, we tested it blind, and this one tested very highly.
Yes. And there's a lot of equipment like that. So we're going to try and do, we're going to do some content kind of explaining equipment, right? Some of the lists we made, sleeping pads, right? Like, what is the difference between a $30 sleeping pad at a Walmart and a $500 sleeping pad? And where do you not get the bang for the buck anymore, right? Like, and it depends what you're doing, right? What kind of terrain you're sleeping on, what type of weather you're in, and a good night's sleep is a big deal in the field, right? But me, I'm not an expert on that, and I don't pretend to be. I used Army gear my whole life, and that was it. I didn't have all this high-end gear, and I don't know if it pays off or not. What do you think?
So I think, like, one of my good friends always talks about universal weapon criteria, but he said you could be applied to universal gear criteria. How much does it weigh? How much does it cost to replace if you lose it? How does it pack down, right? And you can ask the same questions of, say, like rifle, pistol, shotgun. Like, what's the effective range? What's the number of rounds that it can hold? Things like that. I think it's really important to identify what the need is, and then once you establish the left and the right limits, then you determine, okay, will this gear fit it? And if it doesn't fit it, then move on to something else. It's so tempting, though, to listen to these celebrities that get into the experts, the experts, right? That get into the outdoor space. And they're like, oh, you got to use this one. And it's like, man, that guy said it. He looks the part.
And he's being paid to push it.
And here's how I look at equipment too, because part of equipment is buying the damn stuff, right? And we only have so much money that we make. And when you look at certain gear, it's so tempting to be like, I'm going to blow all of my wallet there and spend all my money on this one item, but then you have nothing left over.
Yeah.
I look at buying equipment like real estate. When you buy a home, you say, all right, where do you spend most of your time? Well, probably in the bedroom, probably in the living room, maybe a little bit in the kitchen. Maybe you spend some time in your garage if you're a tinkerer. And you kind of prioritize which rooms are the most important, which ones have the nicest features. So when you go to buy a house, you're like, well, I do love my sleep. This one has the nicest bedroom, right? So if I go and I buy equipment at a store, I'm like, all right, what's the number one thing I need to do when I'm in the great outdoors? Am I spending time in my tent? Am I spending time, cutting wood? Like, I'll look and I'll prioritize those needs, and then buy the gear and allocate the amount of money so I'm getting the most bang for my buck, But again, it's so tempting because marketing can be deceptive. Marketing,
absolutely.
Oh, this will do all this, and it's like, okay, yes, the equipment will do it, but if you don't have the skill to back up that equipment, you're only using that equipment at, say, like 75% of its potential. Like what did Todd Hodnett say about rifles? He goes, at 100 yards, your target will be an indicator of the rifle. At 1,000, it's the indicator of your ammunition. there's so many ways to think, and that goes back to basics, right?
Yeah.
Like we want to teach you how to think, not what to think, because ultimately you're more of an asset if you're a thinker than you're a follower of just blind following, like whatever.
I look at all these so-called experts, and people blindly do what they say, right? You should question everything. I want us to be a trusted agent where we lay out the gear and we go, hey, look, cheapest to most expensive, pros and cons to each one. Where do you fall in? And that goes for sleeping bag, it goes for boots, it goes for packs, it goes for socks, it goes for base layers, and that's just one kind of small area in the outdoor world where we can educate people on the things to look for and the key performance parameters in each one of those types of equipment.
Right.
So you make good choices, because it's very tempting too to go into a store and go, oh, let me get a North Face pack because it's the most expensive, so it must be the best, right?
Yeah.
Or, well, I've heard of this one and I don't know that one. And I told you a story earlier on. Like, I spent my whole life in the military. And when I was running Force Mod, I was at AUSA or SHOT Show or somewhere with one of my guys, and I had 8 commodity areas that I managed, but I was not an expert in them all. I was an inch deep and a mile wide on hundreds of programs, right? But I had Green Berets in each commodity that were experts. And my soldier systems guy, who was, they deal with uniforms and backpacks and body armor and a bunch of stuff like that. He brought me to Mystery Ranch's booth at SHOT Show or USA, and he pulled up a pack and he explained all the features in that pack. And I had no idea that this does this and this does this and this is why this is this way and this. And I was like, oh my God, education is key. But we look at the shiny object and it's difficult to make a decision if you don't have the tools. Tell me about one, when you go to the field, let's say you go camping, because you still do that
all the time.
Do you take a tent or do you take a tarp?
Sometimes I take a hammock.
Yeah.
Sometimes I take a tent. Colder weather, when there's no mosquitoes, I'll take a tarp, right? Because that's part of that education.
Colder weather. Oh, because
they're all gone.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, people say, oh my God, you freeze your ass off in the cold and you have to wipe your ass with snow. You don't have to, but it is a clean wipe. It's super clean. But you don't have to worry about any of the bugs. So that just comes with the understanding, all right, there's probably going to be less precipitation. You're definitely not going to need mosquito netting. You can leave that extra weight behind. And then I'll bring the hammock with me if there are going to be bugs, if I am going to be in a wet environment, because I want to be up off the ground. And especially if I'm going somewhere where there's a lot of exposed roots or uneven terrain where I can't find a flat spot, I'll take the hammock. But again, that's not starting with, here's the only shelter I have and I'm going to make it work. It's like, let's go to the environment, find out what the environmental criteria is for shelter, and then I'll figure out what I need to sleep inside of, over and under, and then work from that backwards instead of from the gear forwards.
No, I've never slept in a hammock in my life.
Oh my God. I've got an extra one.
Never.
I got a feeling you're going to conk out in that,
I don't think so, man. Aren't you really, really curved in it?
Man.
Uncomfortable?
Hammock technology has come a long way, right?
Yeah, that's weird. I've slept on vehicles, in vehicles, on top of vehicles, and helicopters moving, and freaking. I've slept in some weird places. Never slept in a hammock. Tell me about a piece of equipment that you have that was not expensive and high end that works better than the high end stuff.
Oh, geez, something that's not expensive that
There's
works
got to
better.
be something.
How about, okay, so we mentioned sleeping pads,
Yeah.
okay? And we just talked about cold weather camping. Here is part of that education component. Everyone wants to get the big inflatable mattress for camping, right? It's 3 inches thick and, it's inflatable, it's soft, it's squishy. Well, those are called open foam mattresses. They let airflow go right through them. So it also lets cold air conduct through it or cold air move through it very quickly. Well, the little cheap, inexpensive closed foam mattresses, the Thermarest, the Z-Rest and things like that, those work better in the winter, And then you think about it, if you're camping on snow, you already have a mattress underneath you. You just need to protect from the conducting effect of it, right? So that's a perfect example. I've got the $150 self-inflating mattress, but I've camped next to a fire. And when an ember landed on it from my buddies, actually Jerry,
Really?
Building a giant fire, they popped my sleeping pad and I woke up in the middle of the night frozen because if that thing pops, you don't have that insulation anymore. It's gone.
What about taking 2 cheaper pads and
Perfect.
using those? Yeah.
Perfect.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like in the military, everything you carried, right? And ounces make pounds and pounds make pain, right?
That's right.
So, like our sleeping pad, I remember cutting it down just to cover my back. So it was like this wide, like this deep. So it's smaller, and it's all about capacity. It's funny during breakout because this time, last time we had a small day pack and they had plenty of gear. And this time, because it was colder, I had them bring a sleeping bag. Well, a sleeping bag pushed it beyond the small bag.
Yeah.
So I gave them all a big rucksack, and by God, they filled it. Because that's what you do, right? Oh, I have enough room in here. Let me stuff 3 pair of pants and 9 pairs of socks, even though I'm only out for a few days, and more of this and more of that. And it's way too much, and we grow into our shell. So good lesson learned. I let them do it, but good lesson learned.
You know, it was something that we talked about before jumping on the podcast is the concept of like being like brand loyal. And you mentioned that your guys will say, oh my God, we got to get this brand, right? And that can be like a blessing and a curse. Like if you get a really good brand, you can say like, look, I'm loyal to this brand because XYZ, but sometimes when you're too loyal, you don't recognize the other brands that are great competitors.
What you'll do is you'll kind of ignore bad features and you'll elevate good features on your good, right? So like people ask me about optics, right? I like Vortex, and I tell you why I like Vortex. Number one, I've dealt with that company a lot. They have kind of low end, medium, and high end equipment, right? So there's something for every budget. Because there's other optics companies out there, and if you want to buy a scope, you better be pulling $3,000 out of your pocket, right? So they have low end, medium, and high end stuff. They also have a lifetime warranty, which is a big deal to me, right? Because stuff breaks, and very good at taking care of customers. So I have no affiliation with Vortex. I don't actually even have a Vortex scope, I think, but I do. I have a couple of Razor HDs, but I have used Vortex extensively, and I like that company. Right now, I like Night Force too. I think they're a great company. I like Leopold. I think they're a great company. There's a lot of good companies out there, but when a lot of the features are the same, you got to do a little analysis and not be loyal to one thing, because everybody brings something to the table.
And see, in that description that you just gave is honest, right? Like I've had an affiliation with Kafaru since 2006, 2007. They're family. I've stayed at the owner's house. I've eaten dinner with him and his wife. Like I'm very loyal to that company, but I'll tell people, I'm like, look, this might not be for you because it might be out of your budget.
Yeah.
And I'll tell someone like, look, this is my opinion. Yeah. It's important you understand it's my opinion. This is my reason for using it, but you may find that it might not be the one for you, and that's totally fine.
Yeah, if you're going into the backcountry for a week hunting, you might want to have a good Cavaro pack. Right now, if you're going out camping with your family, not the pack for you.
Yeah, you can get by. You can get by with a Rubbermaid bin in your vehicle, loaded with all your kit. Guess what? You're not hauling it. Yeah. So again, it's important that we maintain that level of honesty, and that gets back to the idea of teaching people like, look, this is focused on you. Don't worry about us, right? Like we're here for you. We're a training wing of the company to make you better. Don't worry what I can do. Yeah. It's all about your improvement and what you get out of us.
So as we go through this series, we build these. We will remain unbiased, and our loyalty is to the customer, right? To the consumer, to give you the honest answer. If we don't, call us out. But we will go through all this kit, and we will give you high end, low end, budget for everybody, pros and cons, and then you make your decision from that.
You know, in all the podcasts that I do, I always manage to bring up some stupid movie reference, like just dumb. And I remember there was a Wayne's World movie where they were talking about being sellouts and subtle advertising, and they're like, oh, here, have these pills, little, yellow, different. And it was always branding. And I think it's so, like, my sensitivity to that with certain companies, I'm like, geez, they must be getting sponsored by that guy or that guy or that guy, right? And there's nothing wrong with sponsorship, but
you have to make a living.
You have to.
So, you're a sellout. Yeah, you got to pay the bills, right?
That's right. Keep the lights on.
If as part of my job I have to promote companies, I will, but I won't do it for a shit company, right? I will, like we promote SIG a lot. SIG is a fantastic company. They're really squared away. I know a lot of the instructors. I know a lot of the product development guys. They're special operations guys up there. They hired the right people. They take care of I actually talked to Andy up there. Andy used to work for me at Sniper School, and he's one of the, and he told me the culture in SIG is phenomenal. He said when he got there, he pulled he had a big U-Haul truck with all his household goods, and he pulled a car, and he pulled up to his house, and a bunch of people from SIG came over on a Sunday and unloaded the truck for him, and they really took care of him. And that's what's important as a company, right? If I didn't like SIG and if I didn't think that was a good product, I would not promote them. But they're a phenomenal company, and they make great equipment, and I've seen that time and time again. So I got no problem with that. But again, companies are sponsored by other companies in some cases, and that pays the bills, and it lets us, me and you, sit here and make all these videos to educate you. And that's how people should look at it. Like SIG is paying the bill for us to make all these educational videos for you to consume for free. That's how I look at it. We got a lot of stuff to do, and we're going to get moving fast and furious, but I think you're probably in your element here.
Feels good.
Land navigation, survival training, med training, personal security, tons and tons and tons.
Yeah,
of
and then the
courses.
free training. The free training every Wednesday.
Yep. So, looking forward to it, man.
Oh my God, so damn good to be here.
Yeah, I have an EDC knife in my pocket.
just one.
I have an EDC knife. It's a little folding knife from Spartan Tactical, and I use it every day, because I open monster cans with it, because I have no fingernails. That's the only thing it's used for.
And see, that's the criteria right there. You have no fingernails, get a Spartan knife, right?
Yeah. And it's a Spartan blade, because I got it.
Courtesy marker.
It was given to me, but otherwise I'd get one at Walmart. Okay? All right. All right, guys. Until the next time, lots of content coming. And with Kevin here to help me with some of the scheduling for a lot of medical stuff and land navigation and all that, I'll be able to pivot and do more content myself, because I know I've been slacking, but it does take time. But so stay tuned. Lots more coming. Thank you.